All this talk about vampires and werewolves reminded me that in middle school, I had this OC, like this original character I made up. That was her gimmick was she was half werewolf, half vampire. I know this is terrible already, but like that was the gimmick, was that she was born between like an were a, a, a taboo union between a vampire and a werewolf, and she was raised by the werewolves until she started manifesting her vampire powers, so that she got exiled from them. She tried to join the vampires. They try to kill her. Basically, she gets trapped. The person who kills her family, like her parents, is like the head of the vampires or some shit like that. And oh my god, this sounds terrible. But they end up underground in this like mine cavern or whatever the fuck. Oh, and he buries her alive. I remember right. So she's like alive through the centuries. But she's starved and like ghouled out and like whatever. And eventually that place she got buried underground turns into like a subway. And she's like digging it through the she's like in the dirt, and she digs out and she stumbles upon train tracks. She's like, what is this? And well, not even that. Like, first she attacks the first human she sees, the person doing maintenance, like on the train, the subway, and then the subway train hits her. And the dude, there's only one dude on the subway, and the person who meets her is like the comic relief character, the deuteratinus, or the I don't know what to call it, but the second protagonist, to the supporting character. It's a fish out of water story, and the friend who's trying to rehabilitate her to the modern world meets with her, and it's like this will they won't they thing. And this sounds awful, but like it was supposed to be like a tween drama. I thought it was gonna like be really good as a comic, and I never made the comic, but I drew a bunch of concept art for it, and I think it's still on DeviantArt somewhere. But then, because the main gimmick was the guy who killed her father, who was a werewolf. The mom was a vampire, and he was the head of the vampires, and he was the same one who buried her alive, and she vowed revenge, but she didn't even know if he was still alive or not. So like after acclimating into like the modern day world, becoming this, it's so stupid already. Like she becomes this like high school student, and she goes to high school with the boy. He's teaching her about like how to be a human and shit like that. And it turns out the head vampire dude is the head of this like evil corporation that I don't even know what they want, to either turn everyone into vampires or kill all humans. I don't remember the plot that well. I just remembered like the clip notes. And God, there's somewhere in my deep folder somewhere is a PDF or a Word document displaying the synopsis, and I think I wrote the story from beginning, middle to end, and I don't remember. I remember I don't remember the middle that well. I remember the beginning where she gets buried alive. I remember the ending where her and the boy end up together, despite everything. I do not remember the middle that well. But the premise of it was that not only was she half vampire, half werewolf, and she's going into this high school and learning to become a high school student, but on top of all of that, she was a superhero. So at night, because at night, vampire, whatever, she could fly, like a vampire, and she had the tail of a werewolf and the super strength of both, and she was like a hybrid or some shit like that. It was a really corny story I made up. And the story, so she had like the whole gimmick was she was a superhero, and she took like her old clothing from the 1800s and like modernized it, and like it was stupid. She turned into like a jumpsuit. It was really dumb. Really dumb. I remember really liking the character. I think I did a playthrough through Bloodborne, RPing as her or some shit, because in that game you fight like monsters and shit. And the gimmick was that she would fight werewolves and vampires and other monsters and shit that would threaten her school. It was like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of thing meets Spider-Man, and it was really dumb. Like really dumb. I remember I tried to make it look moe as shit. And like looking back at the comic relief, the boy character she was supposed to be was clearly like an Arthur insert character. It was this like brown dude. He was Hispanic, I think, in the story, but like he wore the same beanie I wore. He was nerdy. He had glasses on. He always wore a hoodie because that was the only thing I knew how to draw. I think his gimmick was that he also drew cartoons or some shit, and that the meta joke was that he was drawing the comic based on their lives, based on her life, or whatever. I think around the part when I gave up was like designing the villain. I couldn't figure out what the villain was gonna look like, the like evil vampire guy. And I also couldn't figure out what he wanted. Oh, there was also this like really stupid love triangle thing between her, the secondary protagonist, and this jock character. It was dumb. It was really dumb. I'm glad I didn't make it. But sometimes I think back to it and I'm like, what if I made this? What if I like actually made this? And I don't regret not making it, but like sometimes I think back to it and it's like there's something there in that idea of like this vampire, immortal, mythical creature person that had to live through the centuries underground and has to adapt to modern day. That idea sounds cool. The rest of it was bullshit and full of like really stupid tropes. But the shit where she had to like crawl into the subway and I remember thinking it was so cool. And I think I came up with the idea around the time I watched that Brad Pitt Tom Cruise vampire movie, The Interview with the Vampire shit. Now that I think about it. I remember really liking her character design. She had this like kind of Victorian skirt thing that turned into like a... Like from the bottom was a skirt, but then from the top it was like a jumpsuit. Oh, and she would wear like a mask to cover the fact that she had like fangs and like glowing red eyes and shit like that, so people wouldn't freak out. Like her being a superhero, it was like similar to like what's that bullshit called? Not I Am Legend, the other one where Will Smith plays like a superhero, an immortal superhero who lived through the ages. What is that shit called? Hancock. That's what it was called. Hancock. It was like Hancock, in which like she was this disillusioned person that lived through the ages, and then like because of modern day, the only way we can accept something is like if it's a superhero franchise. And it was supposed to be this like meta commentary on like superhero movie. Like Hancock wasn't a good film by any means, but I was interested in the idea of like playing on the trope, or what's it called? I think this is the thing every young writer wants to do growing up when you get into writing, is like subverting the genre. You always want to take a genre that you like and flip it on its head, or something you don't like and then make fun of it like a satire or whatever. I think that's what I was going for. And as like I was full of a bunch of ideas like that, like, ooh, what if this was the thing, but it was like this? And then I think I just mentioned that, like with the like, what if it's the zombie apocalypse, but they're in rehab? And you know, I'm kind of, I like to flip shit a lot. Sometimes it can be dumb and not like super well thought out, but sometimes it works. And I think that zombie one works, and I think this one halfway works. I think it could work. Maybe if the deuteragonist love triangle thing wasn't a thing, and maybe it'd be more interesting if she wasn't a high schooler and she was just a grown woman and she had to deal with like like she went from 18th century like England, whatever, where women didn't have like a bunch of rights and shit, and she had to grow. Now she's acclimating to a 21st century world where women have more say in the world, and there's more expected of her than to like, I don't know, get pregnant at 13 and have babies and die and whatever the fuck. And maybe she I don't know, becomes the stronger character because of it. I don't know. Again, it's not a well thought out idea. Maybe instead of like a second protagonist that teaches her things, she learns things on her own from like the ground up, and or maybe that'd be kind of annoying, like watching a character having to learn basic shit like we do. It's weird. Sometimes I love fish out of water stories. Other times I hate them because it's like, oh my gosh, they really have to learn every little thing. Other times it creates funny scenarios. Like shit, like when Dio's like, so this is what an automobile is. Interesting.